You're breathing now, inhaling, exhaling automatically, right? In 1257, 17,000 people lost that ability in a matter of seconds. Not because of disease, not because of war, but because their lungs turned to stone. The Samalas volcano exploded with a force that made Vesuvius seem like a sneeze. 40 cubic kilometers of mountain simply disappeared, pulverized, thrown into the stratosphere. The explosion was heard 2,000 kilometers away, but the noise wasn't what killed. It was the silence that followed. Because when you see an 800-degree wall of ash coming toward you at 300 km/h, when the sky turns to night at noon, when every breath is like swallowing crushed glass mixed with acid, you don't scream, you simply cease to exist. 1257, the year the medieval world discovered that hell wasn't beneath the earth, it was within it and was about to rise. But before understanding how 30,000 people turned to ash in seconds, you need to understand how they lived. Because the tragedy wasn't just death, it was the paradise they lost. Lombok wasn't the miserable Europe of its time. Forget cold castles and starving servants. This island, Indonesia, was literally the center of the world. Cloves, nutmeg, pepper, spices worth more than gold grew like weeds. A handful of black pepper bought a house in London. And Lombok produced tons. The Kingdom of Lombok controlled sea routes connecting China, India, and Arabia. Every day, 200 ships anchored in its ports. Arab merchants traded horses for spices. Chinese paid in silk and porcelain. Indians offered precious stones. The capital, Pamatan, had 80,000 inhabitants, more than Paris at the time. Teak wood houses with thatched roofs stretched for miles. There were no stinking sewers like in Europe. The Javanese irrigation system was so advanced that historians still don't fully understand how it worked. Imagine waking up to the sound of gamelans playing in the Hindu temple. The smell of incense mixed with curry being prepared. Children running between stalls selling fruit you've never seen before. Durian, mangosteen, rambutan. Men haggling over pearl prices. Women weaving batik with patterns that would take months to complete. They had something Europe wouldn't have for centuries. Public baths, clean water piped down from the mountains. While European kings smelled of sweat and shit, any peasant in Lombok bathed twice a day. The food? Fresh rice every day. Fish caught that morning. Fruit you ate straight from the tree, spices that made every meal an experience. No moldy bread or rotten meat. And there were the signs. 2 months earlier, the wells had literally started boiling, water bubbling without fire. The elders said it was the angry gods. They made offerings, sacrificed buffaloes. A month earlier, the tremors had begun, small at first, with cups shaking, then larger, walls cracking. But tremors were common in Java. No one worried too much. A week earlier, the animals had gone mad. Elephants trumpeting incessantly, birds circling until they dropped dead. All the island's dogs howling together at night. Fish leaping out of the water, preferring to die dry. 3 days earlier, the lake atop Mount Samus had simply evaporated. 8 billion liters of water vanished. Fishermen climbed to investigate and found the dry bed covered in dead fish and a sulfur smell so strong they vomited blood. But they didn't flee. Where would they go? This had been their home for generations. Their dead were buried there. Their gods lived on that mountain. On the last night, the king held a feast. He ordered everyone to dance to calm the spirits. 30,000 people danced under the stars, drinking arak, laughing nervously. They went to sleep thinking the worst was over. At 5:43 a.m. the next day, Mount Samalas proved them wrong, fatally wrong. Let me explain what happens inside a supervolcano seconds before it explodes, because it's not like dynamite. It's worse, much worse. For weeks, magma had been rising from the Earth's mantle, 700 degrees of liquid rock, pressing against the crust. Imagine a pressure cooker the size of a city. Now multiply the pressure by 1,000. Now add 40 km of magma, wanting to escape. The mountain was literally swelling, growing 3 meters per day. But no one had measured mountains in 1257. At 5:42 a.m., the pressure reached a critical point. The rocks at the top of the mountain could withstand 400 atmospheres of pressure. At 5:43 a.m., something gave way. A microscopic crack, the size of a strand of hair, was enough. The instantaneous depressurization transformed all the water in the magma into steam, expanding 16 times in volume in 1 decimeter of a second. It's like instantly turning an Olympic-sized swimming pool into steam. The explosion was equivalent to 800,000 Hiroshima bombs fired simultaneously. The sound killed people 50 kilometers away. It didn't deafen, it killed. The shock wave was so violent that the liquid inside cells exploded. Eyes burst, internal organs turned to jelly. Eardrums not only ruptured, but disintegrated. But the sound was merciful compared to what came after. The eruptive column rose 43 kilometers, higher than commercial airliners fly today. In 8 minutes, it crossed the troposphere, stratosphere, and reached the mesosphere, carrying with it 20 billion tons of pulverized rock. The temperature in the column was 1200 degrees Celsius. Car-sized rocks were being thrown at supersonic speeds. But it wasn't the big rocks. The problem was the ash. Volcanic ash isn't campfire ash. It's glass, billions of microscopic fragments of volcanic glass, each sharper than a razor. When you breathe, they cut your lungs from the inside. When they enter your eyes, they scratch your corneas until you go blind. When they mix with the water in your lungs, they turn to concrete, literally cement in your organs. Then came the collapse of the column, when 43 kilometers of superheated material could no longer support itself and collapsed, creating what scientists call a pyroclastic flow. I call it the river from hell. An avalanche of gas and ash at 800 degrees C, rushing down the mountain at 300 kilometers h, faster than a bullet train, hotter than lava. Impossible to run, impossible to hide, impossible to survive. It crossed water, climbed hills, entered caves, melted rock, vaporized trees. And when it hit a human being in 2 seconds, you went from being a person to a statue of ash. Their bodily fluids boiled instantly. Their skin charred, their bones calcined, but their brains still functioned for another 3 seconds. 3 seconds conscious while their bodies turned to charcoal. And that was only the first hour. But the first to die were the lucky ones, because they died without understanding. The village of Pasangi was only 8 kilometers from Somalis. 2,000 people were waking up for another day of work in the rice fields. Mothers were breastfeeding babies. Men were sharpening tools. Children were feeding chickens. They saw the flash or the roar, and then they saw the wall, a 200-meter-high wall of dark ash coming toward them. Some ran, others prayed. It didn't matter. Mother Kadek grabbed her 3-year-old son and ran into the house. She thought the wooden walls would protect her. The pyroclastic flow tore through the house as if it were paper. Archaeologists found their bodies 700 years later. She still held her son, both of them transformed into perfect casts of ash. You can see the expression of terror preserved forever. The king of Lombok was in his palace in Pamatan, 30 kilometers from the volcano. He thought he was safe, far enough away, stone walls, 500 guards. When he saw the cloud approaching, he ordered all the gates closed, all the windows sealed. The heat from the flow cracked the stone walls. The air inside the palace reached 300 degrees C in seconds. Everyone died of asphyxiation before the ash even entered. They cooked inside the fortress itself. The gold in the royal treasury melted. The guards' swords turned to puddles of metal. Teka's throne burst into flames spontaneously. But the worst part wasn't the pyroclastic flow. It was the rain that followed. It wasn't water. It was sulfuric acid mixed with volcanic glass. Each drop burned the skin like boiling oil, but it also cut through millions of microscopic fragments of glass. People ran for shelter, and the rain pierced thatched roofs, melting clothes, turning skin into red mush. A Chinese merchant named Jai Wei was on his ship in the harbor, ready to set sail. He saw the explosion. He ordered the anchor to be raised immediately. Too late. The acid rain began. His 40-man crew tried to take shelter under the sails. The sails melted. The men screamed as the rain ate their flesh. Jean threw himself into the sea to escape the pain. The seawater was boiling. He died cooked like a crab, and then came the waves. The mountain collapsed through 1 kilometer of rock into the sea instantly, creating 15-meter tsunamis. But these were no ordinary waves. They were waves of boiling mud. Volcanic ash mixed with seawater and debris, thick as concrete, hot as soup. The coastal village of Bayern disappeared in 30 seconds. 3,000 people didn't drown. They were buried alive in mud that dried instantly like cement. Fishermen on the high seas saw the black wave approaching. Some jumped from their boats, sank into the mud and were sucked under. Others stayed in their boats. The boats were crushed like eggs. Within 4 minutes, 17,000 people were dead. But the numbers don't tell the real story. Each of those 17,000 people woke up thinking they would live another day. But they were only the epicenter. The true apocalypse was just beginning, because Samalas had just poisoned the entire planet. 40 kg of sulfur were released into the stratosphere. Within 3 weeks, this toxic cloud circled the globe, blocking the sun. turning day into twilight, and so began what historians call the year without a summer. I call it the preview of the end of the world, 1258 London. Summer simply didn't arrive. In July it snowed. July the crops rotted in the fields. The wheat didn't grow, the barley died. In August, the Thames River froze for the first time in 200 years. Chronicles of the time describe the panic. The sun rose red as blood and weak as a candle. At noon it looked like a full moon. Leaves fell from the trees in the middle of summer. Birds fell dead from the sky. Famine began in September. First the poor, then everyone. The price of bread rose 1,000%. Then there was no bread. People ate grass, tree bark, boiled shoe leather. Rats became a delicacy. 20,000 dead in London alone, 1/3 of the population. Starving to death in what should have been summer. Paris was worse. Accounts of the time speak of mothers eating dead children. It's not a metaphor, it's literal. Famine turned men into beasts, wrote a monk. I saw Christians gnawing on human bones in the cemetery of Saint Innocence, but Germany became hell. In Cologne, the mayor ordered the hanging of anyone caught eating human flesh. They hanged so many that the rope ran out. They began burning people alive. The smell of roasting human flesh attracted more cannibals. A macabre cycle that lasted all winter. The Holy Roman Empire lost 400,000 people, not in war but from famine, caused by a volcano 15,000 kilometers away that no one knew existed. The church declared it the beginning of the apocalypse. Processions of flagellants marched through cities, whipping each other to death. Jews were burned as scapegoats, women accused of witchcraft for stealing the summer, and nature went completely mad. Wolves descended from the mountains and invaded cities, packs of 50 animals attacking in broad daylight. In Munich, wolves killed 80 people in a week, not for food but out of desperation. They too were starving. Rivers changed color. The Rhine turned red for 3 months. The Black Danube was not biblical prophecy. It was sulfuric acid reacting with minerals in the water. Dead fish formed dams of rotting flesh. The stench could be smelled for miles. And then came the final blow. The cold killed the fleas that killed the rats that carried the bubonic plague. With no natural predators, the rat population exploded, eating stored grain, spreading disease, and paving the way for something worse. 90 years later, the Black Death would kill 100 million. Historians now know that the Somala's explosion created the perfect conditions, weakened the immune systems of generations, destroyed agriculture, and created rat overpopulation. A volcano in Indonesia prepared the greatest bacterial genocide in European history. Everything connected, everything a consequence. And now let me explain why you, specifically you who are watching, would last less than a week in that world. Do you think you're resilient, that you would survive?
Let's shatter that illusion now.
First, you don't know how to make fire, no. Lighting a match doesn't count. Making a fire with rocks and twigs in the rain with your hands shaking from the cold. You would die of hypothermia the first night without heat. In 1258, even 5-year-olds knew how to make fire. You don't even know where to begin. Second, your water. You've been drinking tap water your entire life. Your stomach is virgin. A single sip of medieval water would give you explosive dysentery. You'd shit yourself to dehydration. You'd die in 3 days lying in your own feces, crying for saline solution that doesn't exist. Third, you don't recognize real food. You don't know which root is poisonous, which mushroom kills, which fruit stops your heart. You'd see a plant and not know if it's medicine or poison. They knew. As a child, you'd eat the first colorful thing and die vomiting blood. Fourth, your hands. Look at them, soft, callus-free. You can't hold a hoe for an hour. Your ancestors worked 16-hour days in the fields. Your hands would bleed in 15 minutes, become infected in 2 days, gangrene in a week, amputation without anesthesia or death. But the worst part isn't physical, it's mental. You're used to answers. Google, doctors, specialists. There, when the ash began to fall from the sky, no one would explain anything to you. It's divine punishment, it's the end of the world. You'd go mad with uncertainty. Your modern, information-addicted brain would go into existential panic. With no Netflix to distract you, no Xanax for anxiety, no Instagram for validation, just you, the cold, the hunger, and the certainty that you're going to die without understanding why. Do you know what they did to panicked people who couldn't work? They abandoned them. It was that simple. Resources were scarce. You either contributed or died. Your diploma was useless. Your Excel skills were a joke. You'd be dead weight. And when you tried to explain that you came from the future, that you knew what was happening, they'd burn you for witchcraft. Literally, inexplicable knowledge was a demonic pact. You'd die screaming the truth while being called a servant of the devil. Life expectancy in 1258 dropped to 28 years. Half of all children died before the age of 5. Do you think you're special? That you'd be different? Would you die of cold or hunger or disease or violence or despair? Probably all at the same time. Crying for antibiotics, for painkillers, for your mother, for Wi-Fi. While the medieval world died fighting, you would die crying. Because you weren't made for survival, you were made for comfort. And here's the most terrifying part. We only found out about Samalis in 2013, 756 years later. Think about it. The eruption that changed the planet's climate, that killed millions, that altered the course of human history. And we simply forgot it happened. It was a French scientist, Frank Lavin, who connected the dots. Antarctic ice showed a massive sulfate layer in 1257. Medieval chronicles spoke of the year without a summer, but no one knew its origin. Samalis had been completely erased from human memory. When they found the caldera in Lombok, the shock was total. 40 km in diameter, 700 meters deep, a crater so large it has its own ecosystem. And no one knew it was there. But here comes the part that should keep you awake at night. How many other Samalas have we forgotten? Earth has 15 active volcanoes. Only 169 are monitored. 1,231 volcanoes could erupt tomorrow. And we don't even know they exist. Lake Toba in Sumatra is a supervolcano caldera 100 kilometers long, exploded 1,000 years ago and nearly wiped out humanity. Fewer than 10,000 humans remain, and it's active. Tremors every week. It could explode at any moment. Campelgray in Italy, 13 km of caldera. 500,000 people literally live inside the crater. In 2023, there were 4,000 earthquakes in 1 month. Scientists discreetly evacuated their families. The media didn't report it to avoid panic. Yellowstone, the most famous, when it explodes I don't know when, will cover 2/3 of the United States in ash. Global agriculture collapses. 2 billion die of hunger in the first year, and it's 60,000 years too late to explode. But the worst part is that we found evidence of even larger eruptions that don't even have a name. Ash layers in Siberia, sulfate in the Greenland ice, unexplained mass extinctions, civilizations that disappeared overnight. The Minoan civilization, destroyed by Santorini, the Acacia Empire, a likely supervolcano, the Tang dynasty in China, volcanoes, always volcanoes, and we always forget. Do you know why we forget? Because the survivors were too busy trying not to die to write about it. And when they finally rebuilt, they wanted to forget, turning it into myth, legend, divine punishment. We are the first civilization with the technology to detect, to remember, to perhaps prepare ourselves. And what do? We build cities on top of volcanoes. Naples, Tokyo, Mexico City, Seattle, all on top of geological bombs. 3 million people live around Vesuvius today. 3 million. The volcano that everyone knows is deadly. Yet they build their homes on its slopes. The question was never if it will happen again. It's when. And if you think our technology will save us, let me destroy that last hope. Because our civilization is no stronger than the medieval one. It's more fragile, infinitely more fragile. In 1257, when Samalis exploded, people knew how to live without systems. They made their own clothes, grew their own food, built their own homes. When the world collapsed, they had the basic tools to rebuild. You depend on 19 interconnected systems just to survive a normal day. Electricity, internet, treated water, sewage, transportation, refrigeration, telecommunications, GPS, banking systems, all functioning perfectly, all vulnerable. An eruption the size of Samalis today. Let's be specific about the collapse. First, the ash. Volcanic glass particles destroy airplane engines instantly. All global air traffic stops permanently, not for days but for years. 14,000 planes grounded. Global supply chains dead. Second, electricity runs out in 72 hours. Volcanic ash is conductive, causing short circuits in transformers. Without electricity, without pumped water, without sewage, cholera within a week. In cities, millions would die drinking water contaminated with their own waste. Third, your money doesn't exist. It's digital. Numbers on servers that need electricity. Without power, without access, without purchases. Paper money. 92% of the world's money is digital. The little physical money would be useless because there would be nothing to buy. Supermarkets have food for 3 days. After that, massive urban famine, but different from the medieval one. They knew how to hunt, fish, recognize edible plants. You know how to order fuel from iFood. Refineries shut down without electricity. Gas stations don't work without electric pumps. Even if you have a car, you can't fill up. You're stuck where you are. Medicine. Insulin lasts 28 days without refrigeration. Antibiotics spoil. Antidepressants run out. Millions of diabetics die in the first month. Simple infections become death sentences again. People withdrawing from psychiatric medications are going into mass panic. Communication. Cell towers need power, internet, servers, radio, repeaters. In a week, total silence. You wouldn't know if your family was alive. You wouldn't know what was happening. You wouldn't know if it was the end of the world or just a local emergency. And worst of all, we no longer know how to do anything manually. Modern agriculture relies on GPS to plant crops. Without functioning satellites, farmers literally don't know where to plant. Computerized tractors stop working. Automated irrigation fails. Hospitals' generators last for a week. Then it's back to the medicine of 1257. But worse, because modern doctors don't know how to treat without tests, without machines, without Google. Appendicitis becomes a nuclear death sentence. 440 nuclear power plants around the world all require constant cooling. Without electricity, without cooling. Chernobyl multiplied by 40. Radiation killing the survivors of the eruption. The difference is brutal. In 1257, each community was self-sufficient. Today we depend on 15,000-kilometer supply chains. A chip from Taiwan, wheat from Ukraine, oil from Arabia, medicines from India. All of this stops immediately, permanently. They rebuilt in decades. It would take us centuries if we could. And it will happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And you need to understand this now, at this very moment, as you watch Camp Flegrei in Italy had 3 tremors. Yellowstone released 200 tons of CO2. Toba in Indonesia warmed 2 degrees. All signs exactly as Lombok did in 1257. Statistics are relentless. Supervolcanoes erupt every 50,000 years on average. The last one was Tambor in 1815. We're in the window of time at any moment. But you won't prepare. I know you won't. You'll watch this video, be scared for 5 minutes, and then go back to your normal life. Just like the people of Lombok, who ignored boiling water and fleeing animals. Want to know the brutal truth? 99% of those watching will die within the first 2 weeks of an eruption like this. Not because of the explosion, but because of their own ignorance. You don't know how to purify water. You don't know how to identify edible plants. You don't have stored food. You don't know basic first aid. You don't even have a flashlight with extra batteries at home. Meanwhile, those preppers you mock have months of water, a year's worth of food, generators, medicine, knowledge. They'll survive while you die searching for a Wi-Fi signal. This video can save your life, but only if you act. Not tomorrow, today, now. Learn to make a fire, buy a water filter, store canned food, download offline maps, learn first aid, have cash hidden, extra medicine, batteries, candles, and a thermal blanket. You don't need to become a paranoid survivalist, but you do need to be at least minimally prepared for 72 hours without a system, because when it happens, there will be no second warning. Samarlas has been giving signals for months. The next volcanoes are also giving them now today. Earthquakes in Japan, Jaspers in Yellowstone, fumaroles in Italy. The Earth is screaming. Are you listening? If this video made you realize our fragility, share it now. Not tomorrow, now. Every person you don't warn could die from ignorance. Their blood will be partially on your hands. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, because I'll bring you more truths that the system doesn't want you to know. How to survive the collapse, how to read the signs, how to avoid being another statistic. Leave your comment. Where are you watching from? Is there a volcano within a 1,000-kilometer radius? Spoiler, there probably is and you don't know it. Like, if you want more content that can literally save your life, ignore it if you prefer to die in ignorance, because the next time the Earth spews fire, there won't be a YouTube tutorial. There won't be a Google search. It'll be you, the chaos, and the knowledge you now have. Samarlas killed millions who ignored the warnings. The question is, will you be different or will you be just another number in the next mass extinction? The choice is yours. Time is running out. The geological clock is ticking, and the mountain is already shaking. Look, I know you'll leave this video and return to Instagram in 30 seconds. It's natural. The human brain is programmed to ignore distant threats. But let me tell you a secret about people who survive catastrophes. They're the ones who heeded the warnings when there was still time. That video now on your screen is about the earthquake no one expected that killed 300,000 people. The same people who thought it would never happen here. Click on it. Not for me, for you. Because knowledge about historical disasters is literally survival information disguised as entertainment. And if you've made it this far, watch 25 minutes about volcanoes and death, it's because some primitive part of your brain knows this is important. This part deserves more information. So do this, and it will literally take 3 seconds, like it. Not because my ego needs it, but because the algorithm needs to understand that this kind of content matters, that people want discomfort, not just dancing and pranks. Each like pushes this to someone else who might need this information one day. Write your city in the comments, that's all. I want to map where you are. Maybe you'll discover that there are more people concerned about survival in your area than you imagined. Maybe you'll even form a support network. Have you thought about this? Share it with that friend who always says, "If something happens, I'll come to your house." Send it to your family group with the message, "Watch this before it's too late, because when the ash starts falling, you'll want prepared people by your side, not panicked ignoramuses." And subscribe, because every week I bring you a historical event that nearly extinguished humanity. And one day, maybe sooner than you think, one of these events will happen again. The difference between living and dying may be a video you watched 6 months ago, but most importantly, watch the next video that's on your screen now, while you still have electricity, internet, and time, because knowing how civilizations died is the only chance to avoid repeating their mistake. Or ignore all this and go back to your feed. The choice is yours. Just remember, the 17,000 people in Lombok also had a choice. They chose to ignore the signs. M.